Okay, so Dick, there has been some question about how much responsibility these companies bear for missing the manipulation on their platform, not knowing the extent of the effect of it. What responsibility does Facebook and Twitter and Google bear here?
Well, I think I would separate it into two things. I think they have a responsibility once they've understood the problem and the issue to discover the scope of it and then go address it. And I think they're doing that. I think it would be a mistake to say they bear responsibility for missing it. This is stuff that's come to light after the elections. It wasn't anything I think anyone knew had happened in previous elections, so make sure we get out ahead of it this time. Everyone's been seemingly surprised by it. And it's now a matter of doing the detective work to figure out just how deep and broad it was and then go attack that as quickly as possible.
Twitter has already announced some changes. What changes do you think Twitter should
Well, I think Jack has made a pretty broad and aggressive statement about we're going to be more transparent about political ads that are purchased, all political ads that are purchased, and we're going to be more aggressive on abuse. I think those are great steps. And as I said when I was CEO, I'd like to see us be a lot more aggressive. So I'm happy to see him doing that.
The ads are one thing, but some people say the ads really aren't the real problem. It's the number of fake accounts, the number of people pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, you saw, again, Twitter said yesterday, I think, in the hearings that they think 5% of the accounts on the platform are bots.
Do you agree with that? Because some people think it's a lot more.
Well, again, there are two things I'd say about this. One, I trust the folks inside the company if they're giving a number publicly, particularly in front of Senate and House hearings. I expect that they believe that that's the correct number. The thing you have to remember about there's the sort of sometimes there are researchers that come out and say, well, the number's actually a lot higher than that, and here's our data. They're going off some of these raw API feeds. And by raw API feeds, I mean they're looking at the tweets that are coming through these programming interfaces before Twitter delivers them to users. It's akin to looking at a Gmail feed before they go through and apply any of their spam filters and saying, hey, 25% of your Gmail is spam, and you look at your Gmail inbox and say, I don't seem to see any. Well, Gmail applies a lot of defensive mechanisms and countermeasures against the spam that comes in and filters it out before you see it. I think that might be, I'm guessing, I think that might be the discrepancy between what Twitter is saying the number is that gets delivered to users and exists in their number counts and what some of the independent researchers are talking about. That was certainly the case when I was the CEO.
Is it true that to some degree these networks are essentially ungovernable because you have hundreds of people trying to monitor more than 300 million accounts?
No, I don't think that's true. I think you can apply all sorts of machine learning techniques and other kinds of algorithms to do the things that you should be doing and be doing a better job of, like protecting the community and making sure that the information that's being delivered on the platform to the greatest extent possible is not foreign propaganda and fake news, to use the sort of the term of the day.
Keith Raboy of Costolo Ventures was on the show yesterday, and he called these proceedings essentially fraudulent. Actually, he used the word fraudulent because
that doesn't surprise me.
He believes that it's completely ridiculous to blame these companies, these social networks, for potentially swaying the election and spreading misinformation when there's a broad spectrum of what misinformation actually is. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll try to take a more nuanced approach to the answer. Look, on the one hand, you could say, well, people lie on TV all the time. You can point to, one or two news networks and say, well, that was not even remotely true. So it's not Facebook, Twitter, and Google's problem. It's everybody's problem. My position is a little bit more. Look, we all have to take responsibility for trying to prevent this from happening again. And as the leaders in the technology field that are delivering a lot of this information to users using algorithms that we think are best suited to deliver them the right information, we need to bear responsibility for addressing this. I do think, I watched some of the hearings yesterday morning, and was very proud of Sean Edgett from Twitter's counsel, who is there and is one of the more ethical people you could ever get to meet. I do think that it would have been better if those hearings were more about problem solving and finding solutions and less about political theater. You get these long-winded statements that come with sort of questions in the form of an accusation that seem to be designed to make the person answering the question look either complicit or stupid. Choose one. And I would like to see them be more about let's work together to find solutions and problem solve instead of blaming people and trying to get on the evening news.
Do you think it's possible that these social networks were actually responsible for swaying the election in the favor of Donald Trump as a result of this meddling?
I don't know. The fact is the numbers change as those companies do a lot more investigative work on what actually happened. We've seen changing numbers in this many users were exposed. Actually, it was this many. Well, it might have been this many. And that's not them, again, they get sort of attacked for this and as if they're hiding information. They're doing the detective work as fast as they can to figure out the extent of the problem and get after it. So as those numbers change and they grow, it's unclear whether we're sort of at the end of the road for how many people were exposed to this and how often they were exposed to it.
Do you think Twitter's a media company? And if so, what's its responsibility to vet what's published?
It's certainly in the media business. There's a sense in Silicon Valley that these companies are platforms and only responsible for distributing information and not making editorial decisions. The fact is, and I think Jack has acknowledged this, is that these companies, all of them, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, make editorial decisions all the time. We're going to suspend this account. This doesn't meet our standard for nudity or pornography or whatever, so it can stay. This one doesn't meet it, so it has to go. So I think that these companies need to admit, if you will, hey, we make editorial decisions all the time, and we need to live with that and understand that being in the media business, even if we're a technology company, means that we're going to have to take more responsibility for those editorial decisions.
So what are some solutions as you see them?
I mean, one sort of simple...
You know how hard this is.
Listen, also, let's be clear. The ads aren't, coming from, Uncle Vladimir, wanting to pay for Cornhusker moms for Trump. That's not it's not that simple, right? I do think you should probably only take political ads from organizations that are registered in the country in which the election is taking place. That sort of seems like an easy one. And things like that don't let the election fall outside the bounds of that region in which the election is taking place, or its influence start to extend out of bounds of the region in which that election is taking place. That seems like sort of a simple and obvious one to me. The problem with legislation around just things like transparency are that the organizations aren't going to name themselves the former Soviet Republic of so-and-so they're going to name themselves something that sounds like, hey, that sounds like the Iowa or California, grassroots Republican organization or Democrat organization. So it's got to be more about making sure that the organizations themselves are registered and paying taxes and filing their forms, et cetera, in the countries or regions in which these elections are taking place.
You've been very vocal about harassment on these platforms, and I'm curious for your reaction. Twitter has said they're going to change the way they approach harassment. They're going to be more transparent about the way that they approach harassment. This in the wake of the Me Too campaign, the Harvey Weinstein allegations, actress Rose McGowan, her account getting suspended as she was talking about being sexually assaulted. Do you think it's too little too late for Twitter, or that Twitter can actually get this problem under control?
I think it's a problem that they should address. Jack knows they need to address it, and they should be more aggressive in addressing it. And the same was true when I was CEO. So I don't think it's too little too late. It's one of the most vital and important platforms in the world. It's literally the way to get information or your opinion about something out in a moment. and it will be that way for years to come. And, great, start now, get more aggressive now.
Is it a matter of, being more...
Also, I don't think it's... let me just add one thing to that. The word that's used is transparent. I think what would also be helpful is for these organizations to provide context for why a certain decision was made. It's one thing to just say, we made this decision because of this specific tweet, but then people might draw the wrong conclusions from that. It would be helpful. I get how hard this is, believe me. You could spend all day doing it. But it would be helpful to say, we made this decision about this specific piece of content for these kinds of reasons. And that might not solve all your problems or answer everybody's questions, but at least it'll start to give people a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes and why some of these issues are as challenging as they are.
Is it a matter of being, less laissez-faire about free speech and what counts as free speech?
Well, I do think that
because in saying free speech, in saying free speech, you actually have others whose speech is being suppressed as a result.
Yes, I mean that's a simple entree into what is really an unbelievably complex problem. In fact, in political speech, one person's abuse is another person's no, that's what our party believes. Yeah. So it really gets complicated. But I do think maybe there was a sense years ago, 5 years ago, that the more open and the more free you are can only be better. And I think that that's tempered now for lots and lots of reasons. The Russian, apparent Russian meddling in the elections, abuse, people posing as one kind of organization and really being another, et cetera.
All right. Dick Costolo, one last question about tax reform.
Oh,
we're
good.
Expecting tax reform.
Finally, we're getting to my core area of expertise.
We're expecting tax reform. How do you think it'll impact tech and the investing community?
Listen, I'll just give you my blunt assessment is they were unable to pass repeal and replace, and that was something seemingly the party and the majority agreed on across the board. Tax reform is 10x, 100x, maybe infinitely more complex. I have a hard time believing it's going to happen.
All right. Dick Costolo, always great to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Sure.